Well, for this episode of Mr. Nailsin's Wednesday Comics, I think I'll concentrate on The Flash, both the comic book currently and the prequel comic for the movie. So I managed to get a hold of 3 issues of current Flash, and this was because I was watching other videos, and I'd been looking for people to say, well, you know, this one shows promise in spite of it all, you know, the current era and all that sort of stuff. And primarily Thinking Critical is probably the best one for that. And that's what I think it was primarily Thinking Critical that got me into the new World's Finest, which leaps and bounds is the best on there. And it's astounding that it's that good, having been written by Mark Waid. But it's just good. Why? Because it's just a basic superhero story, and that's all there is to it. And it's just, you know, and because that's become such a rarity now, well, it seems like a bigger deal than it probably would have been under normal times, you know. But so what are the other possibilities out there? Well, I recommended Chip Zdarsky's Batman. I still haven't checked out Chip Zdarsky's work on Spider-Man. That's been a while. I'd heard that was good, but I just was in no mood for it. I did read one of his Daredevil comics. Wasn't too bad, but it didn't blow me away like World's Finest. The Batman thing was interesting, but a lot of it, I had problems with it. But there was no detours into wokeness and that sort of thing, and that's great, but it's not enough. And so I'll give Batman another chance, but I thought that was a rather odd and bizarre story. But then again, he's coming after other crap that they had to deal with. Alfred had died and all this stuff, and I don't know. So there's problems that could seemingly be unfair to the current team because they got to navigate through all that, and I understand that, but it still is what it is when it comes to all the mess that you're dealing with. And if you can't craft your way out of it, then you fail, even though you could argue it's not really fair. What's not fair for these Flash issues is, I was told that, hey, Flash is getting pretty good, is that it's all this Dark Crisis tie-in stuff. And so that's what drags it down. So that's primarily what it is. There's some aspects of this. The Wally West is, for all intents and purposes, the Flash again. Because Barry Allen supposedly died because of Dark Crisis. The Justice League was wiped out. But surprise, they're not really dead. They're trapped in these altered worlds or whatever. Each individual has their own version of Earth, I guess. Something like that. I'm not keeping up with it. I have no interest in Dark Crisis. But this is a tie-in to it, and it's the primary core of it. So that's spoiler. I did not like these issues. But even if Dark Crisis wasn't the main thing, and this was just a Flash story that, you know, Barry Allen was missing, and Wally's got to find him, the way this is dealt with is still all the same thing. It's just a bunch of, hey, look, another version of this and another version of that, and they've done this for years now. And it's, I just don't care, and it doesn't really go anywhere. So Wally's looking for him, but another aspect of this is similar to what they did with Spider-Man, in that Spider-Man's a guest star in his own comic because of Spider-Verse, and there's Spider-Men all over the place, and Spider-Women, and what have you, and nothing matters anymore. It's a one-off thing, fine. But to keep no, that's it. The whole thing is all this. So now there's Flashes all over the place, and that's nothing new for the Flash. Of course, there's Jay Garrick, and that goes all the way back to the birth of DC Comics from the '60s and the Silver Age of introducing multiverse, which was so simple back then. And so you got a bunch of them. They all got to come together, and we got to find Barry, and we got to, and so it's Team Flash, literally, and all of that. And I don't know that you can really say that Wally, they keep putting him like he's in charge, but I don't know. And he's undercut by his wife, and of course, his kids, they always had powers. I do recall that. So, of course, they have powers, and then they get into some shenanigans and get lost, and they got to go find them. They find yet another Batman version of the Flash. I don't think it's, maybe it's just another version of the Red Death. It's not the Red Death, but and that's the thing. Some of those metal standalones, offshoots, one-shot things, they were kind of cool. And sometimes even the metal stuff was funny. But it went nowhere. It teased a bunch of stuff, and then you're stay tuned for the next event. And, well, I can't remember how many they've had in between, and now here we are, Dark Crisis. And they never do what they need to do, which is erase all this nonsense they've been doing and just, okay, we're back to basics, and then actually tell stories. Oh, boy, that'll be hard. We don't have all these multiverse distractions to make it seem like we're actually telling a story. So that's what drags it down. There's too much of that in there for anything that seems to be good. I didn't bother with Identity Crisis. The art was beautiful, but the whole premise of it was terrible. But apparently it destroyed Wally West, made him a murderer and all this stuff. So it's kind of hard to undo that, But they find different versions of Barry, a Mad Max version and stuff like that. So then they find the real Barry. And for once, there is this interesting moment where it's classic Flash, And it's like, just stay with that. But it's the fake world that Barry's trapped in, and they wake him up out of it. Wally doesn't. His wife Linda shows up and hits him in the face to knock him out of it because he thinks Wally's an enemy or what have you. And then he realizes, oh my God, this isn't real. I've got to free the Justice League. So he doesn't go back home with them. Well, what do I tell Iris? Well, just tell her I love her and I'll be back later. So that's what he's going to do, check out Dark Crisis to find out how that goes. No, I don't care. So that's it. They find him, and he still, so Wally is still, for all intents and purposes, the main Flash of the title for the time being. But in the meantime, Linda gets superpowers. So, of course, you can't have a non-powered wife or girlfriend or what have you of the superheroes because they don't need no man and all that. Yet she's constantly berating him for not being around or what have you. None of it makes sense, but it's just slapped in there very quickly. She gets a costume that kind of looks more like Jay Garrick's, and of course she's badass and good at it. Well, she just got the power. Even the kids would be better at it than she is. So, yeah, it's stupid. So they go another universe where, I don't know, broad. It doesn't matter. It's all universes that may not even exist anymore when this is all over, or revamped or whatever. And it's just a bunch of cheesy jokes that fall flat, and that's it. So I didn't really see anything here that told me that there's potential, what have you. Perhaps once it's out of the tie-ins, maybe there's something. But I don't know. I don't see it. I'm sorry. So maybe it is, maybe. I'll give the next issue that is not a Dark Crisis tie-in, and maybe it'll land and be more sound. But I don't know. I haven't heard anything good coming. The hope was that this big reboot would fix the obvious problems with DC Comics. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen. So, at best you'll get a couple of anomalies like World's Finest and maybe what Jeff Johns is going to do with the Golden Age characters and the Justice Society and all that. Maybe those will be good, but everything else, just forget about it. Don't see that working or surviving long, especially when their parent company is looking to cut the fat. And the only thing that keeps these alive is just because they're precious IPs for other products, not comic books. So ultimately, they outsource it. Perhaps this rumor that Todd McFarlane will take it over, and maybe that'll be interesting. Certainly the crossovers and all that stuff he's doing and his toys and everything. Yeah, that's definite. Maybe that would save it. Other than that, I guess the best thing they could do is just package a bunch of reprints of old favorite comics, and you can catch up on the ones you missed from those glory days, you know. So anyway, the other Flash comic is issue 2 of the Flash, the Fastest Man Alive prequel comic for the forthcoming film. Should Ezra Miller remain quiet. Well, there's good and bad in it. There's a villain he faces off against called Tar Pit, not Venom, but pretty much looks like Venom. And since they're always chasing Peter Parker with quite a few characters, certainly the Flash is one, and it's certainly for the movies, that's kind of the thinking that they seem to want. I don't think that worked, but that he's this awkward guy. He's terrible at work because he's never there because he's busy being the Flash and stuff. So his coworkers don't like him. He gets kind of picked on, even though the boss sees potential in him. He's got that's all classic Peter Parker stuff, and it's, you know, of course it happens to other people, you know, but it's too on the nose recognizable templates of it, and it would have been interesting, I think. That because I mean this is following the Justice League movie, and I think that's both versions of them, where he did get a job. You know, he goes to tell his dad, "This is a real job. I'm going to be working at, you know, a crime lab and all that," and that by now he'd be a little further along and have stories that involve him going on cases, you know, and he has to solve it and stuff, and it could involve this Tar Pit guy who was a gangster, and in some strange accident turns him into this monster, and he basically ruins the whole gang with his brother because of his antics and everything, and attracts the attention of the Flash, and the Flash, of course, ultimately defeats him. I doubt that any of these villains would make an appearance in the movie. Perhaps there'll be some mention if there's anything like that. More times than not, these tie-in comics to the movies ultimately mean nothing, and they don't reference them or anything, so who knows. But no Captain Cold. Perhaps they weren't allowed, you know, they just had to throw in these villains they made up on the fly. I don't know. Let me know in the comments, did they introduce a Tar Pit character in Flash comics? I'm not a big Flash reader, but I've been looking for titles in the hopes that there's something good out there. No, I'm not thinking so. So, art was sort of okay, probably a little bit better than the last one. But story-wise, it's pretty basic. So it's not terrible, but I kind of thought the first one was a little better. So, there's that. There you go. Wednesday Comics in a flash. Tee-hee. Tee-hee.